All right, well, thank you everyone for joining today. Really excited to be here. My name is Grace Kitzmiller. I'm a Senior Product Manager for a portfolio of resource management services. So that includes tagging, resource groups, Resource Explorer, and application operations. With me here is Paul Hoffman.
Hi, I'm Paul. Once Grace has done her bit on applications, I'm going to spend a little time talking to you about how AWS Systems Manager can help you with some of the things you do to run applications. And not surprisingly, I work on the product side on Systems Manager, so I'm covering a little bit of that. But I'll let you go with Grace first.
All right, great. Thank you. All right, so we're going to cover a few topics today. First, we'll talk about applications, and then several new features that can help make it easier for you to monitor and manage and operate your applications and resources on AWS. And then, as Paul just mentioned, he will join in the second half and talk a little bit about some new Systems Manager features, as well as how you can use Systems Manager automations to streamline your application operations as well. So first, how many of you are running applications on AWS? All right, see a lot of hands. And maybe you recall your journey to get those applications up and running. Maybe you experimented first, developed a proof of concept. Could be you just lifted and shifted your on-premise applications, or maybe you used a marketplace template or an AWS Solutions Library template, or engaged with an AWS partner, or ProServe, or rolled your own. There's many, many different options that we hear from customers about how they get started with their applications. And as you're creating all those applications on AWS, you've probably found yourself creating thousands, hundreds of thousands, even millions of resources. And what we hear from customers is that creating all these resources on AWS can sometimes feel like you've got a large collection of unrelated resources that can create some challenges as you're trying to monitor and manage and operate those. We hear feedback from customers asking, what's the best way to organize my resources and applications so that I can better visualize and manage them? How do I map my security findings? What are the right tools to use to troubleshoot most efficiently and to automate that troubleshooting? And then how do I track and optimize my costs? And it really makes sense, right? It's really difficult to reason about thousands of things all at one time. And so AWS does provide you different tools that you can use to organize your resources across AWS. So let's first maybe talk a little bit about those organizational constructs, and then we'll dive a little bit more into the operational side. And we'll start with tagging. How many here use tags? Similar number, yeah. So tags, as you know, are really key value pairs that provide a way for you to add some metadata to your resources on AWS. We also like to think of tags as really a semantic bridge between your business infrastructure and your AWS infrastructure. And we hear some of the most common use cases from customers around tagging, and you may be using some of these yourself, are to add tags such as like department, cost center, department, cost center, team, application. And tagging today is most often used for things like cost allocation or security and governance. For applications, customers tell us they use tags to identify the environment. So dev, test, prod, right? What's the stage of the resources that are being used for the application? Also to sometimes map your resources based on the functional use case. So some customers will apply tags to all their storage resources, or all their compute, or all their alarm, or all their observability resources. Others use tags for lifecycle management. Some customers go ahead and, if they're creating temporary resources, might put an expiration date as a tag, so that then it's easy to go back and really remove some of those unused resources or resources that aren't needed for a long time. Also for data classification, is this resource handling, public, private, confidential data? And then also to represent regulatory requirements. Is this resource involved in, say, a regulatory workload? Are there financial services regulations or PHI regulations? So really a lot of different opportunities to use tagging. And so after you tag your resources, now you start to see some differentiation. You start to create different collections. And you're able to actually sort and filter and start to really think about your resources differently. Instead of it just being one large collection, you can actually start to think about how you manage these collections that matter to you and matter to your business. But customers said, tags are, they support a lot of use cases, but I want another organizational construct. I want something even a little higher level than that. And this is where resource groups come in. Anyone using resource groups? I got a few people, yeah. So resource groups are really collections of resources with a set of tags that you specify. So you can select one or more tags, use that to create your resource group. You can also sub-select within your tags by specifying different resource types, because a lot of times resource groups, in addition to tags, are used to support different kinds of automations. And so you can set up an automation to run against a particular resource group or a set of tags. And Paul's going to talk a good bit about automation in a few minutes. So once you start to have your resources in a resource group, you're creating some richer collections. You're able to cross just the tagging environment or the tagging metadata and cross into, starting to see your infrastructure take shape in a different way. But how do you find the resources that you want to group together or you want to tag, right? You create thousands of resources. This is where Resource Explorer comes in. Anyone using Resource Explorer? I know I have a lot of questions today. All right, we've got a few. So perfect. Resource Explorer is AWS's resource inventory search and discovery service. It's actually available at no cost. A few quick steps to set up. There's a quick setup, and you can activate it in just an account, or you can activate it across your entire organization. And so once you have Resource Explorer set up and it's inventoried the collection of resources that are in your account, you can then use the Resource Explorer console to search and filter by keyword, by service, by resource type, by account, by region. And there are also APIs available. So there's a search API and a list resources API. So you can engage with that inventory programmatically as well. Now, we launched a few new features in just the last couple weeks. I'm going to actually hop into a demo in a minute so that you can actually see what some of those features are. All right. Okay. Ooh, hold on a second. Okay. Sorry about that. I'm not sure if this is playing. Okay. Okay, so this is Console Home. I don't know if you're a console user or not. And what you can see is at the top of the screen here, I've got Resource Explorer pinned as a favorite. And let's see if this. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Resource Explorer. And this will bring up the Resource Explorer console. So if you haven't used this before, this will actually give you a great preview into what you're able to find. So once the console is open, you can see the full list of resources in your account. It will return, and you can paginate through the full list if you'd like. And then you can actually go ahead and start thinking about how you'd like to filter down to a subset of resources you might be interested in. In this example, I would like to search by some of the properties that you see here that are predefined. And I want to search for any resource that has a tag value that starts with the word driver, because I've already got an existing tagging strategy, and I've got my driver application that I'm running on AWS. So I see 24 resources, but I don't want to see all of them. I actually want to take a look at just the EC2 instances. And so I see I've got 3 instances. And when I click on one of those, I can actually now start to see some more details about that particular instance. I can see costs over the last 14 days, config compliance, as well as security findings. If I want to dive deeper, I can click on any one of those and go directly to the service console to see the full set of information that's available and provided by that service. Config compliance information is actually also available I can see that I've got one resource that's out of compliance. Again, I can deep link and start to take action to remediate that resource. Next up is the Relationships tab. So this is actually a view of what resources this particular resource is interacting with. Oh, all right, I'll come back to that, sorry. This is the resource timeline. So this will show you CloudTrail and config events. You can also see the collection of tags that are associated with your resource and the full set of properties that you would find on the resource detail page. On the right, we see the different actions that are available for these resources. And I'm going to go ahead and take an action here. So I'm going to remove the filter for the EC2 instances. And I'm going to actually just select this whole set of resources. Because now I can do a bulk tagging action here. I can bulk tag or bulk untag. So in this particular instance, I'd actually like to add that staging tag to this collection of resources. This is my production application. And so I can come into here into this view, set the tag, and update all those resources at once. I can either add or remove tags in this view. And I can also export directly from this view as well. Now there's one more piece that I'd like to show related to the features that are available for these for EC2 instances and for any of these resources. We actually now have an integration with CloudWatch so that you're able to pull up in this view the out-of-the-box CloudWatch metrics that are available for this resource and scroll through and see the full list. And if you have any custom metrics set up, those would show up in this view as well. So now you really have access to quite a bit of information that AWS actually knows about your resource, and it's all available on one page. You don't actually have to go off and visit these 5 or 10 different services. You can find a lot of that information right here from this view. And I know that demo went through things pretty quickly. So this slide just shows you a screenshot of all of the new features that are available. So you see the overview, the relationships, the config compliance, the timeline, and the set of actions that are available from this new Resource Explorer experience. And also, the demo went very quickly past this resource relationship graph. So I wanted to add a screenshot here so you could spend another minute or two taking a look at it. So for this particular EC2 instance, this is a visual of all of the other resources that this instance is interacting with. All right, great. So now we talked about tagging and resource groups and how you can find your resource groups because you'd like to organize them so that they're easier to manage and to operate on. So even with tagging and resource groups, customers told us, we really want to operate on AWS in using the mental model that we're bringing to the work we do. We operate applications. How can we start to get these application-centric views of AWS? And so we kind of went back and we thought, well, what is an application, right? If I ask 10 people in this room what an application is, probably get 10 different answers. So when we thought about how would we define an application and what would be the right kind of constructs to create to support application-centric experiences across AWS, we decided it should be a really general definition. An application is a collection of resources and related metadata that you operate as a group to meet a business need. Other terms for application: workload, project, task, and probably many other terms that you might use in your organization. But the thing is, applications are always changing, right? We start by designing, and then we build, and we code, and we test, and we deploy. And then we moved into an optimization phase and an operational phase. But the most successful applications, and the ones, if your business is successful, like your applications are always changing, right? You're always getting new requirements, always getting feedback. And as your application evolves over time, the complexity of operating and managing that application increases over time. So even with tags and resource groups, we actually really need to think about what is that right construct to be able to say define your application once on AWS and use it across many, many services. This is where application operations comes in. Application operations, is really supported by a couple different components, right? There's a set of constructs and features that you can start to use to centrally monitor and manage that collection of resources that comprises your application. These capabilities, again, support providing and building out an application-centric view of your AWS experience across multiple AWS services. And again, it gives you the ability to define your application once and start to use it across more and more services on AWS. So what is the model? What does it look like? Applications have metadata and properties, and applications have resources. Pretty simple. And the services that applications are implemented with include service catalog, resource groups, and the AWS application tag. The AWS application tag is an AWS managed but user-defined tag. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes. So how does this work? First, you declare or define your application. You give it a name, you give it a description if you'd like to, and you can associate other attributes with it as well. And then on the back end, AWS creates a resource group for you, an app registry object and a resource group for you. And we also generate a unique AWS application tag. And if you look at the bottom of this screen, you'll see really what the tag key looks like and what the application tag key value is. This is not just limited to a console experience. I know we've been focusing, and we'll focus a little bit more on the console experience, but you can really create and operate on your applications through console, CDK, APIs, infrastructure as code if you're a CloudFormation, Terraform user. Those are all supported as well. And I mentioned the myApplications dashboard. I'll show some screenshots of that in a few minutes, but logically, this is what it looks like. As of today, there are a number of services where we've integrated insights that are generated from those services into that single page dashboard view so that you can really start to understand what's the cost, performance, security posture of this application, and what are those areas, what are those hotspots that maybe should inform the next best action that I take for my application. And so with the application construct, we're going from really sort of very undifferentiated set of resources that you've created. With tagging, you start to bring a little bit of organizational to it. With resource groups, you start to really see your infrastructure take shape in a way that you can visualize and manage it. And with application operations, you really are getting to a highly functional, organized view of your resources on AWS to make operating your applications even easier. How do you get started? Again, you can use console, API, CDK, infrastructure as code to get started. And customer told us, hey, I've invested in these tagging strategies already. Like, how can I just reuse my existing tags to onboard to this? So you can create new applications, and you can also onboard your existing applications pretty easily. So I'm going to actually go ahead and start the next demo, which will show how you can onboard your existing applications onto, using your existing tags onto AWS. So this is Console Home again. And in this scenario, I'm a customer that has set up a logistics app as my tag key that I'm using for my applications. And I've already got a loading app and a shipping app that I've set up and added as applications on AWS. Now there are a couple dependencies in order to use this bring your own tag approach. There's a custom, there's a trust policy and a managed policy for tagging that you need to create. And then also we enable group lifecycle events so that as you are adding or removing the tag from resources, your existing tag from resources for your application, this application will stay in sync with that work that you're doing. So you won't actually have to take the time to figure out how to sync separately through some additional activities. So the next step that I want to do, okay, well, it'll be posted in the, wait, okay, it just went. So I clicked the Create Application button. Thank you for your patience. And the first step in creating an application in the console is to go ahead and give it a name. We talked about that before. You can optionally give your application a description, and you can add some additional tags if you're interested, and you can also add attribute groups, which is a way to add some additional metadata to your application. When you're done there, you click Next. And now you can choose to either add your search for your resources manually to add to your application, or select and use an existing tag. You click the Learn More button to go ahead and check up on the documentation if you'd like to read up a little bit more about some of the permissions and policies that might be required and group lifecycle events. But when you're ready to go, you come back to the application page. And the next step is you go ahead and you click that role so that you've granted the proper permissions to do the tagging and to actually create the application. We hopped over to the IAM console to take a closer look at what's required for the role. So this is just the custom trust policy and the tagging permissions. We actually now have a managed policy that you can select here, which makes it much easier to grant the tagging permissions that might be needed. So when you're ready to go, after you've selected the role, now I'm selecting my existing tag key, which is the logistics app tag key. And the tag value is I'm creating the driver app and onboarding it. In this next page, I can preview the resources. If I want to double check on anything, if I want to click a deep link to go to actually see the resource details page, I can do that. After I've taken a little bit of time to preview the resources, I go to step 3, which is review and create. Again, I can review the information that I entered for the application, acknowledge if you've selected a CloudFormation stack, there might be a stack update, and then go ahead and click to create the application. Once you hit that Create button, we are preparing the application dashboard for you. This dashboard won't be very populated because we've just created this application. But you can see the success message at the top letting you know that it's been created, and this will populate shortly. So here I've switched to the loading app dashboard, which has been up and running for a little while. You can see some CloudWatch metrics have been pulled into the view. Here's a summary of security findings that are generated for the application resources in Security Hub. Again, I can see the filter and search on the list of resources. I can take a look at some DevOps information, like what's my instance management and my patch policy look like. And I can access some CloudWatch metrics directly in this view as well. And of course, cost and usage gives me the opportunity to track and manage my cost and usage information. Okay. So the demo briefly touched on the myApplications dashboard. I'll just go through a few pieces of the dashboard in a little bit more detail. First, the cost and usage widget. This will show you your trend over time in your application costs and the different resources that are contributing to those costs, the forecasted costs, as well as some savings opportunities that you could explore to help optimize your application's cost. Next is the compute widget. So this will pull up some of the key compute metrics like CPU utilization, key Lambda metrics around number of invocations and invocation failures. And you can click these deep links to deep dive on the Service Console as well. Next, DevOps widget, again, patch compliance, managed instance compliance, and some of your CloudWatch alerts and alarms. Security findings, are there high or critical severity findings for the resources in the application and the resources widget? And one of the newest widgets that we launched is the resiliency widget. So this is an integration with AWS Resilience Hub. And what this will do is there's a set of resilience policies that you can choose from, as well and a resilience score will be generated for you. And you'll gain some insights into how close you are to meeting your RPO and RTO objectives. All right, so I talked a little bit about the savings opportunities that might be available. Like, how can you go from the application dashboard to actually taking some action that matter for your application? So let's see if the demo plays this time. So again, this is actually for the shipping app. And here we go. So in the cost and usage widget, you can see that there's a potential savings of $22. It's a small application that have been identified for this application. So if I click on that link for savings opportunities, it'll actually take me over to a view that shows me some of those different options that I might want to consider in order to optimize my EC2 instance costs. I'll go ahead and just select the first one and see what happens next. So once I select that, I get some more detail about that EC2 instance. And then if I look to the right, I have the option to go either directly to EC2 if I want to learn more, or I can go take a look at Compute Optimizer. So within Compute Optimizer, if you haven't used this feature, it's actually showing me 3 different options I can consider. And as I click through those options, I'm seeing a projected impact on things like CPU utilization based on how I might resize a particular instance so that I can save some money over time. So based on what I'm seeing here, I decide, I'd like to go to option 2. Option 3 might be a little too close to maxing out my CPU utilization. And I know that I want to resize this to a T3 micro. Now, in this scenario, I'm a pretty big user. My company is a pretty big user of Systems Manager and the automations and the runbooks. And I know there's actually a resize instance runbook that I can use. So I hop over to Systems Manager, click on the automations, click to execute an automation, and I search for the resize instance runbook. I click to start the process of that resize instance process. And what happens is the runbook details show up. So I see a visual of what the workflow the runbook is completing performs. I can also see actually the code behind that. So if I want to use it to create my own runbook, I actually now have this available. When I get to the actual runbook execution page, I select the instance that I was looking to resize. And the only information I really need to enter is, what instance type do I want to resize this particular instance to? So I pop that in, click execute, and now this takes a few minutes to run. We're not going to wait a few minutes here, just a few seconds. And I can see the success message at the top of the page. So my instance has been successfully resized, but maybe I want to go double check, right? So I go back to the application dashboard, and I scroll down to my EC2 instances, and I hop over to the EC2 console. And now this console is, because I've come from the application dashboard page, it's filtered to just the instances that are part of my application. And what I can see here is the instance that I just chose to resize. I can look over here and see that, in fact, it has been resized to a T3 micro. Okay. All right, so we have one last demo. We'll hopefully see how this one works. In this, hold on one second. In this demo, I want to actually think about, how can I use the information that the dashboard is showing me about the security findings for my application to try to decide, hey, what should I be taking a look at? What's an important next step for me to take? So again, this should look pretty familiar. But instead of taking a look at the cost optimizations widget, I'm actually going to take a look at these 15 high-severity security findings for this application. See is when I get to the Security Hub console, again, all of the findings are filtered based on the application that I'm coming from. And I see that one of these findings is actually a CVE vulnerability. A little concerned about that. And so I click on that. I click on the finding so I can learn a little bit more detail about, this particular finding. I scroll down, I can see some more information, like what are the resources that are involved, what are some potential remediation options, and looking at this, I decide the first step I want to take is I actually want to quarantine this instance before I do anything else, and I want to do that quickly so that I can then dive a little deeper into the troubleshooting and the remediation. So I go ahead and I just copy that instance ID out. And again, there's a runbook for this. There's a quarantine instance runbook that I'd like to use. So I can just hop over to the Systems Manager console again. It's going to look really familiar. Click on the automation, and I'll search for the quarantine instance runbook. When I click on that runbook, I can actually check out the details, similar to as I did for the previous runbook. I can see the workflow that will actually take place in order to actually quarantine the instance. I can see the details of the work that's happening as part of the runbook. And when I'm ready to execute the runbook, the only information I need to provide here is actually the identifier for that EC2 instance. So I pop that identifier in, click execute. Takes a few minutes again for that quarantine process to complete. Once it completes, I see a success message at the top of the page. So with that, I've just given you an overview of application operations, some different pieces of options for organizing your resources to start to streamline your operations. And I'm going to turn it over to Paul now, who's going to dive a little bit deeper on Systems Manager experiences and some of those automations.
Thanks, Grace.
Thank you.
I don't know about you guys, but I've been walking so much the last couple of days. When I saw those few stairs there to get up on the stage, I was like, oh God, I don't know if I can make those stairs at this point. My calves are like little knots. So we talk about at Amazon a lot, if you're familiar with Amazon and the things we do, about it always being day one. It's that concept of you're hungry, you're trying to do things, you're always trying to innovate. The challenge is that there is always a day two. And if you've got applications, you've got cloud resources, once that day two comes, you need to do stuff with them. You need to operate them. You need to fix them. You need to patch them. You need to back them up. And that's where Systems Manager comes into play. Grace already showed you a little bit of some of the things that Systems Manager does. I'm going to talk a bit more about how it can really help you with those things. And there's lots of ways you need to look at how do you do cloud operations. There's proactive actions where you need to manage change. You want to make sure there's an approval for that change. It goes through the change board or whatever that might be if you have a cab or something like that. There's also this kind of reactive things where you've got an incident. Now you got to go in and troubleshoot and fix it. You need to connect to the session and you want to figure out what's going on and how can I remediate that. You want to see what's going on. You want to have a foundation for building all these things so that you can automate things, you can create repeatable tasks, you can have compliance. All those important, but you also need to do this at scale. And the numbers you see there, 450 million unique nodes every month, 2.5 billion automated scripts every month. That's what Systems Manager does for AWS customers. We run that many every month. So we deal with a lot. We deal with it at scale and we deal with it effectively, and that's important for making sure your things not only run effectively, you can troubleshoot them quickly, you can remediate problems, you can lower mean time to repair, whatever you need it to do. And the great thing about Systems Manager is whether you're just using tags, you've created an application, you've created a resource group, however you're organizing things, everything within Systems Manager can work with that. We can recognize those attributes and you can do things on top of that. And there's lots of great tools. There's an interesting aspect to Systems Manager. It's got, and we argue about this internally, it's got 18 to 21 tools. It depends on what you call as a tool. But it's got a lot of great tools for doing the things you want to do. Here you see some of them. Quick Setup's pretty obvious. How many people here have used Quick Setup? Oh, not surprisingly, not more. So Quick Setup is just what it implies. It's a set of instructions to quickly set things up. You want to set up a backup. You want to set up an instance a certain way. You want to install an agent. There's Quick Setup kind of for that. Helps you do those things quickly and efficiently, and you can run through those. Actually, I should ask an earlier question. How many people have heard of Systems Manager? How many use it for some things? How many want to give the rest of my presentation? Inventory helps you track things. It knows what attributes of your resources, what you have and how you're using them and what they contain in them. Run command, it allows you to run commands actually on your resources. So you can do things, you can, and I'll go through some examples of what you want to do with those instances themselves. Parameter store allows you to have a centralized area to store things, so now you can share it with those applications and do it in a controllable and sometimes if you want to encrypt it secure way. State Manager is all about compliance. Want to see what's the state of my applications, what's the state of my environments, and if they drift from that, how do I bring them back so that they stay in compliance, whether it's through updates or patches, whatever that might be. And then documents allow you to do a whole variety of things on your resources that you want to either automate or create or duplicate. And here's some examples. So if you look like with inventory, there's all kinds of data you can collect with inventory. It allows you to track what's going on, maintain that inventory, and then if you need to do things, again, you've got that at your fingertips and what you need to do. Run command, as I said, like you can bootstrap an app. You can install things on it. If you want every time, if you want, you've got an instance up and you want to install an antivirus on that, you can do that through run command. Parameter store. It's really great for having your applications. If you have a bunch of applications need to use some credentials, you can store those credentials and make them available, or inputs to the application rather. You can make those available to the application. You can, like I said, you can encrypt those if you want to and make them secure. State Manager. You can do some really cool things with State Manager. You can create State Manager associations that allow you to do certain things based on if it's this, then do that. And one interesting one I've seen a lot of customers do is they'll create an association that allows them every day to go ahead and check, is there an antivirus on all the instances within my account or my org, and if it's not there, go ahead and install it. So that way if somebody did something outside of process, you may have like a standard AMI you use, but somebody went rogue and did something on their own, but you see it in the inventory, and you're like, hey, wait a minute, that one doesn't have the right AV on it, and you can go ahead and do that. So it's really useful for that. And then documents, you can do all kinds of things that you can define within either your JSON or YAML in order to make things run and do things within your applications and the systems you've got, the resources you've got, whatever the groups might be. Another set of commands for automating and management. Here you've got capabilities to do some of your basic things. I mean, automation is obviously important for a lot of things. You can do repeatable tasks, you can make sure that they're always done in the way you want to do them. So again, you don't get that kind of ad hoc kind of functioning happenings. Patch manager, right? Everything needs to be patched. Whether it's for vulnerabilities, for updates, for minor system updates, Patch Manager can help you with that. The next three, kind of Change Manager, Change Calendar, and Maintenance Windows, allow you to get those approvals and the organization you need, so when you want to do changes to your environment, they're either done in certain windows you define, with certain approvals that you need to define, on certain days you want to allow. So it can organize that and ensure that things are done following the methodologies that your company wants to do. And the last one, Distributor, actually allows you to create packages to deploy software, applications, things you want to do. And again, let's look at some examples of that. Interesting thing, we see this a lot. Even though we have a tool called Patch Manager, a lot of our customers actually use automations to install patches. It's an alternative way to do it, right? There's multiple ways to get to an end game, but that's one that can be really useful for you. Also seen customers create backups via automations. You can create that automation, go in, run the commands you need to do to either, I forgot the term for it, but quiesce the database. There we go, got it out. And then you can actually back up the database if you want, and then set it back to the state you want. Patch Manager, like, if you've got a vulnerability I mentioned, you can use Patch Manager to make that update and to get you into compliance. I talked about what you could do with Change Manager. It gives you that ability to create approval workflows. So I say, okay, I've got a new application I want to install. It's got to go to my manager approves it, and then I can run the runbook to install that application. And that runbook will only run if I have the approval on it. It won't go forward without that. Change Calendar allows you, okay, I've got that approval, but now I can deploy that only in the change windows that are allowed. So that ensures you do it within that time frame. And then Maintenance Window says, okay, there's also these periods when I do or don't want to do things. And how do I keep that limited to only those time frames? And what's neat about it too is you can also set volumes on this. So you can say, all right, I only want to do 2 or 3 systems at a time, and I want to do it over this 4-hour period. And what can happen sometimes is, that 4-hour period, I didn't get all my systems done, but I stopped the maintenance I'm doing, and then I'll pick it up on the next maintenance window. So it ensures that you're not interrupting things outside of that maintenance window. And then Distributor, I kind of talked a little bit about that and how you can use that for applications and deploying things. All these tools are really great, but one of the challenges with them is they really were built as separate tools. Patch Manager kind of works by itself. Automation can do some things with patching and other things. Documents and all the other tools I talked about. They're fairly isolated right now and fairly unique experiences. We want to start bringing those together, and that's what we're looking at here, is start to bring it to more so you get an experience that's around how do I do these things and how do I interoperate these things. And we just did a release 2 weeks ago that is a starting point for that. It's a new Systems Manager experience. You may not have seen it yet, especially if you're not a Systems Manager user. But what we did is we started focusing on node management and doing tasks that are outcome-based. So what that means is that now you're in a situation where, okay, I've got my whole portfolio in my account or my org or whatever it might be across the different regions, and I can see that portfolio, and if I want to do things like I want to connect to that node, then I can do that right from there, and I don't have to go to a separate tool to do that. It'll all be right there, based at your fingertips. We've got some starting points on that, which I'll show you in a demo in a little bit, and then we're going to keep expanding that out as time goes on. The other thing we've done, and I'll show you this in the demo as well, but I'll just briefly introduce it, is we've added the capability to start remediating issues that you find within Systems Manager. Now the first thing we focused on is the SSM agent. For those of you who use Systems Manager, you know you can't do anything with Systems Manager unless that SSM agent is installed and functioning properly. So what we've built into Systems Manager is a capability to easily see that, diagnose why it's not working, and then give you runbooks to remediate that. Because that's the first hurdle, right? You get everything to the point that Systems Manager recognizes it and can work with it, and now you can do all these cool things that I just talked about, right? So that gives you that capability to put you in a good situation to do that. So here's the scenario, right? And since everybody likes to see a little bit of AI, we're going to start with Q, right? So we're going to use Q to ask a question about, tell me about all the systems that I have that are running Windows 2016. And it's going to go and find those, and it's going to tell you, I can bring you to Systems Manager to see that full view of what's going on there. And then we're going to do something to fix some of those issues which are unmanaged right now. The SSM agent's not working. And ultimately, we're going to get a list of all of our Windows 2016 instances that I can then give to a team who wants to upgrade those to the latest version of Windows. So that's going to be the full demo. I'm going to pause it at different times to talk about some things that are going on. I'll see if I could do that successfully without, it's going to be weird because you have to, I'm mousing from far away, but we'll see if I can get this to work. Okay, so this is the console, and let me see, it did work. This is the Q interface, so I'll pause there for a second. So what you've got here is the AWS console, and then we popped up on the right the interface to Q so I can ask Q a question. Where did my mouse go? Ah, there it is. All right, I think it paused there. Yeah, you see most of the questions. So I'm gonna, it's not all the questions come out yet. Let's see. Ah, that's not what I wanted to do. It's such a fine line with this mouse button. There it is. All right, I'm gonna try to walk through a little bit of this so I can keep things running. So it's typing in the question to Q. Q's going to come back with a response. See if I can do it without total pause. So here's all the instances Q found. Within there, you see the JSON that actually shows the details of all the attributes of those instances. Now, if you go to the bottom, it's going to bring you actually to the new interface. Let's see if I can pause here for a second. So what this is showing right now is we're in Systems Manager, and what that previous screen was showing you was all the instances that it found. And if you're familiar with Systems Manager, all the old commands that you're used to are on the bottom there, and the new things we've added are on the top left that allow you now to do this more integrated node-based experiences. So if you can't read it, the commands there are review node insights, which is going to be your dashboard. You're going to have explore nodes, which is the list that you just saw. You're going to have diagnose and remediate, which you'll see in a second, and then you've got your settings capabilities for that. All right, where'd you go, mouse? There you are. Wouldn't make the mouse disappear every time, be easier. Okay, so here's your dashboard. Now let me show you what you're seeing here. So you've got a bunch of different widgets that show you what's going on. So you've got your unmanaged EC2 instances in red, and you've got your managed, which are in green. The second window is showing your breakdown by OS of all your instances. So you can see I've got some Amazon Linux, I've got some Microsoft Windows, some Ubuntu, and so on. You've got your SSM agent versions, and then the types of nodes that are managed. Okay. So remember the challenge we're trying to do is I want to upgrade all my Windows 2016. But I don't know if some of those unmanaged nodes might also have Windows 2016. So remediate that is useful, because then I can get my full list of 2016 to update. So let's see how we do that. So what you can do is you hover over the area, and there's a command that pops up. It says diagnose. And what diagnose takes you to that tab and offers you the ability to now go, hey, what's going on? I'm going to run a new diagnosis, and I'm going to figure out what's going on. And it's running that diagnosis. And now here's the execution of the diagnosis, and it says it's complete. And now we've got, from the diagnosis, we found 17 impacted nodes that were managed, which exactly was the number that was shown in the dashboard before. And it's saying they're missing VPC endpoints. So what we've done here is we said, okay, let's see what's going on with those missing VPC endpoints. Here's the runbook that can actually fix that. It gives you all the details in that, and it allows you to decide, where do I want this to run? Do I want to run it everywhere, or do I run it in a certain account, or in a certain region? And here we're picking a certain account in a certain region to run in. We've saved that off, and now we're going to go ahead and actually execute that capability to go remediate the VPC endpoints. So that's running. It's now completed. We can see the task there, and now we're at a point where 100% of our endpoints are managed. And we can now see we've added 7. We used to have 10 Windows instances. Now we've got 17. So 7 more Windows 2016 instances were found. And now what we could do is we could take a look at those 17 Windows 2016 nodes, and we can download a report of that to an Excel file, which I can then give to my dev team or my DevOps people or whoever it might be and say, here's all your Windows 2016 instances, go upgrade them. So we're easily able to figure out from our full fleet which do we need to work on and how we need to do that, and we can give that out to somebody. So what do you get by this? You can really get some insights into what's going on. You can see what's under the covers. You can look at what are the issues. You can diagnose and remediate. You can figure out things through Q, and that's a new thing for us. You can start asking Q questions. That'll bring you to Systems Manager. You don't have to know where to go. It'll take you to the right place. And those tools that I mentioned that are on the bottom that haven't yet moved up to the node management experience, we'll continue to bring those up so you have more and more of an outcome-based experience. And Grace, did you want wind it up, or do you want me to do it? Sure. So Grace talked about a lot of things you could do with resources, you could do with applications, you can do with resource groups. Helps you manage your environment, helps you manage the things you have, helps you keep an eye on them, but most importantly, it helps you do things that scale efficiently and effectively, right? And then when you tie that together with the tools we have within AWS that can work with those, now instead of having to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, you just do 1. All right, and you can apply whether it's patches or updates or backups or moving things, whatever it might be you need to do. You've got an easy capability to do that and manage that and take care of it and see all the details. You can run runbooks against them. You can run all kinds of things that make your life more efficient and more effective. And probably life is probably too much, but at least your life as a DevOps person, an IT operator, whatever you might be doing. And we use this analogy probably way too much here, but it gives you the capability to take a bunch of really cool Legos that are your resources, your components, your applications. Create a structure around that so it now has become very useful, very understandable, and very easy to work with. And finally, here's a bunch of places to get information on everything we talked about. Got some information on applications and how to create them and talk about them. On the bottom, we got some information on Systems Manager. I know that demo I walked through is pretty quick. That last one actually gives you a guided walkthrough of the new experience in Systems Manager, but please take a look at all of them. I think they're quite useful in things we talked about and how to make your work more efficiently when you're using AWS.
Thanks.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.